There are 4 tools. On their own, they're dangerous. But together, it's almost too much power. What if we
那么身为牙医呢，其实我在这边跟你们讲这个，我是挣扎蛮久的，因为民间偏方不是在我们的治疗范围内，这不是我们平常治疗病人会用的方式。但是呢，如果你问，难道这些民间偏方、自然疗法就真的没有效吗？我今天呢就是要讨论这个。感觉好像有段时间没有在这个房间里面了，所以呢，我很高兴这一次呢又可以回来跟你们聊聊天。我上次讲完牙龈萎缩以后呢，其实有非常多人都在问我这个问题，有没有什么方法可以治疗牙龈萎缩，除了要开刀以外。这一年呢，我一直都很想要再继续这个话题。我也看到很多 YouTuber 有在讲说，这些方法，民间的一些偏方真的可以治疗牙龈萎缩。到底在网络上面谣传的那些民间偏方，有哪一些背后真的是有科学根据的？那开始之前呢，我一定要先讲这个很重要。网络上面呢，你会看到很多人都用牙龈萎缩这个名词，可是其实牙龈萎缩这个是一个非常大，它是一个统称而已。而且导致牙龈萎缩有很多种不同的原因，有的是因为牙龈那边发炎，有的是因为你刷牙刷太用力了，有的是因为你有磨牙的习惯。那么找出你牙龈萎缩的原因是最重要的，因为这样才能够对症下药。用对症下药的治疗方式呢，才真的会有效果。那我今天要跟你们讲的自然疗法是背后真的是有科学根据的。我今天要讲的牙龈萎缩是发炎引起的。第一个就是维他命 C， 维他命 C 呢是一个已经被讲了很久的，就可以帮助牙龈萎缩。那研究就有发现，维他命 C 呢如果不足的话，跟牙周病有关系。那牙周病就导致你牙龈萎缩吗？那为什么维他命 C 跟牙龈萎缩会有关联呢？那其实就是因为维他命 C 呢，你只要想它的功能是什么，对我们的结缔组织很重要。那你想维他命 C， 你就想是 Lego， 那你就想那些 Lego 还要慢慢把它组成，然后变成一个形状，对不对？所以它就是对我们身体的支撑结构呢背后有非常大的助力。那么我们牙龈也是，它也是需要被支撑住的。还有一个维他命 C， 它很重要的一个功能，因为你们都知道维他命 C 是抗氧化。那么牙周病会产生，也就是因为我们的牙龈发炎，那我们的免疫系统自己会产生出一个叫做 ROS， 这个反应呢就是导致我们的骨头它会萎缩，还有我们的牙龈萎缩，是我们自己的免疫系统产生 ROS， 然后这个 ROS 呢才会破坏我们这个牙龈还有我们的骨头。那维他命 C 呢，它其实就是 ROS 的这个清道夫，它就是专门攻击消灭 ROS 的。所以呢，如果今天有人问我，那要不要吃维他命 C？ 我的答案就是说，你本来就应该要吃维他命 C， 因为它不只是对你的牙龈有帮助，它对你全身你的免疫系统都是非常好的。所以你本来就要注重你每天有足够的维他命 C。像一个这样中型的柳丁呢，你吃一个，你每一天这样就已经几乎就到了标准了，就是你每天摄取的最低标准了。那么如果你可以吃，像我很喜欢吃这种甜椒，而且呢是比如说红色啦、橘色啦、黄色啦，因为它们这些除了维他命 C 还有很丰富的维他命 A。像如果你可以吃一个这个呢，这个维他命 C 呢会比这个更多。除了这个以外呢，很多水果比如说草莓啊、奇异果啊、葡萄柚这些维他命 C 有很多，还有蔬菜类啊，比如说我刚刚讲甜椒，还有花菜、白花菜，这些呢维他命 C 也都非常丰富。所以维他命 C 它绝对对你的牙龈的健康是绝对有帮助的，这个毋庸置疑。只是如果你今天真的要治疗牙龈萎缩的话呢，你不能只管维他命 C， 当然还有其他的方面，你一定要确保你的牙龈是干净的，这个更重要。这个再加上维他命 C。接下来我要讲的2个自然疗法，它是放在漱口水。那么其实漱口水的功用就是我跟你们讲，减少牙菌斑累积在你的牙龈上面。那跟我之前讲的漱口水不一样的地方呢，是它主要是靠茶树油。茶树油它自己本身是植物，它自己天然的本来就是有杀菌的作用。那么呢，有的研究报告发现说，他们把这个茶树油还有牙医用的漱口水需要处方的那种呢来进行比较，他们之后发现说2个呢，它们的效果竟然没有差，反而呢需要牙医处方的漱口水那个叫做 chlorhexidine， 那个呢如果用久的，有一些病人会产生就是牙齿有可能会变黄，还有呢有可能会影响到他们的味觉。所以呢，通常这个处方呢，医生不会建议说你用超过2个礼拜。但是呢，茶树油它就可以，因为病人呢就没有这一方面的困扰，所以呢你就可以用的比较长一点的时间。当然这个里面绝对没有酒精，因为我绝对不会选漱口水里面是有酒精的。它除了茶树油以外，它里面还有维他命 C， 而且还有 aloe 就是芦荟。那么芦荟呢也是一个很好杀菌的天然的东西。那这个呢我必须要讲，我真的还蛮喜欢它的味道的。我用完它以后，我觉得我的口气变得非常的清新，而且我有注意到就是牙菌斑比较不容易覆盖，就是不容易累积在我牙龈上面。那你要怎么用呢？就跟一般的漱口水一样，嘴巴里面大概就是这样，大概30秒就可以吐掉。那吐掉以后呢，如果可以的话，5到10分钟不要吃东西啊、喝东西啊。如果你可以等到半个小时的话，那更好。所以漱口水是一个很好的辅助的，最重要就是不要让你的牙菌斑一直累积在那边，不要让那里发炎导致牙龈萎缩。再来我要讲的是，刚刚那个是茶树油，这个呢是芦荟，它主要是靠芦荟来杀菌的。那这个芦荟的研究也发现说，它跟 chlorhexidine 2个的效果是差不多的。这个用完的呢，牙齿也不会变黄，也不会影响到味觉啊什么的。那个呢，它是20%的芦荟。这个用完以后，一整天我的口气都非常的清新。它里面会放一些薄荷的东西啊，当然里面也没有酒精。这个呢也是一个比较天然的方式，减少你牙龈萎缩的机会。最后呢，我一定要讲油把法。1年前我讲完牙龈萎缩的时候呢，有非常多人问我油把法怎么用，我也有必要讨论一下油把法。油把法到底有没有用呢？油把法是一个很古老，大概好几千年的时候呢，印度的一种古老的自然的疗法。那么我找到一个研究，他们是用椰子油，那么60个人他用了30天进行就是油把法嘛。那30天之后呢，他们就发现说牙菌斑减少50%。那这个研究呢就跟医生处方的 chlorhexidine 竟然也是一样的结果，这个让人真的还蛮惊讶的，减少50%，那其实蛮多的耶。那么他们用的呢是椰子水，椰子水说老实话会比较舒服一点，因为有些其他的油，比如说麻油啊，味道好太多了。那么如果你想要试油把法的话呢，那我就会建议你买像一个这样子的这种，它已经是一个 packet， 你只要把它剪开，你就可以直接使用了。我觉得使用感这个呢会方便很多。这个椰子油是100%纯椰子油，你本来就应该要用100%的纯椰子油，最好一定要漱15到20分钟才会有最大的效果。当然呢，其实我试过15分钟到20分钟真的蛮长 常的。那么如果你是今天有关节的问题啊，你就是会很酸，我觉得一开始你试试看5到10分钟，然后呢，慢慢你可以再增加。这个研究呢，他们是数15到20分钟的。那椰子有个缺点就是，如果它好像低于76度，它会变成比较硬；低于76度的话呢，它就会变成固体。你可以用这种把它温热的方式，你可以把它焖一下，然后让它温度变高，然后变成液体。如果你想尝试椰子油的话，我觉得这个是一个很不错的选择，因为它比较方便，而且味道比较好。好，那我今天讲了这么多方式，然后背后是真的有科学根据。但是呢，我必须要说，我希望以后还可以看到更多的科学研究，因为现在呢，这方面的研究还是非常的少。当然，你还是要照常刷牙、用牙线、用水牙线，这些呢我之前都有讲过，你一定要还要做这些。如果可以再加上维他命 C，然后呢，漱口水，减少牙菌斑的产生的话呢，那这样就可以减低牙龈萎缩的风险，让你的牙龈萎缩不要持续恶化，变得更严重。好，暌违1年了，我终于把这个自然疗法呢，终于讲出来了。如果你觉得今天的影片对你有用的话呢，请记得订阅、开启你的小铃铛，还有记得不要忘记按赞。好，那我们下次见喽，拜拜。
You know those cigarette butts that you see every day? They're made of microplastics, and they line our streets and waterways. You'll find them on
No, I'm sorry I broke your tail, baby bear, but you can't have my rental car. No.
Let's sit down for a coffee date. Now, I hate it when dates start with small talk, so let's get straight to it. How much do you know about coffee? The average person drinks 3.1 cups of coffee per day. Coffee is a huge part.
Welcome back. Another day of streaming. Subscribe, comment, drop a like if you haven't. Let's continue with the sub-roti. Call-roti quiz. Let's go. Holy shit. Main thread. It's conditioned because it's gonna output self-deprecated responsive UIs when you have blocking code. I'm sure about coroutines when started. You could begin as well with the keyword. It's not async. What keyword I can pause it and resume it. Not always on the main thread, there can be many threads. This one is true. Use the suspend keyword. What would it take? Does it return a deferred? True, I guess. Dispatcher. Does not remember. Deferred. This is literally the definition. Let's see. In. Oh no, actually no global scopes. No global scopes. What can it cost responsive UI? Try again. It's not deprecated per se. It may or may not execute. Oh. Okay, return the pathways and check out the answers. Async and run blocking. Takes a suspend. I don't think run blocking takes suspend. What a question. The question was, which one was wrong about async and run blocking? Both functions take a coroutine scope. Coroutine scope. I don't think that's true. So async returns a deferred. Run blocking, return deferred. when blocking returns are deferred. Needs to use await with async. Anyway, that's this video. See you next video. Welcome back. Another day of stream. Subscribe, comment, drop a like if you haven't. We finished the really short coroutines part 3 and let's jump to the get data from the internet. It looks very practical. I really like it. Retrieve and display images over the internet with HTTP and REST. Let's see.
Take a moment to think about some of your favorite apps. Chances are that many of your favorite apps likely use the internet in some way to help deliver a great experience, whether it's useful or just for fun. Being able to interact with data from the internet is an important skill for Android developers, which is what you'll be doing in this pathway. Before learning how to use the network, you'll need to first learn a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes when your app sends and receives data over the internet. With the kind of networking we'll be discussing, there are two different parts to consider, the client and the server. A client can be a web browser or any other app on a device that makes a request to a server. The server, which you can think of as a computer, knows how to take the request and send a response back. Here's an analogy that may be helpful. You could think of the server like an ATM and the client as a person trying to make a transaction. The ATM machine is always available and waiting for someone to interact with it. The ATM handles each person's request differently depending on what the request is, for example, withdrawing money, depositing a check, and so on. Going back to the client-server relationship, many different clients on devices like phones, desktops, laptops can send requests to a single server, and it's the server's job to process each request and send back the appropriate response to each client. The client and the server use something called HTTP, which is a protocol to communicate with each other over the internet. It includes specifics on how requests and responses should be formed so that the client and server can understand each other. Let's look at how a web browser like Chrome can make a network request. We can go to google.com and then type in Android as a search term. This is what a simplified request would look like. Each part of the request has a specific purpose to help the server understand the client's request. This request starts with an HTTP method. This is a GET request, meaning that we're getting a resource from the server, which in this case is the web page with the search results. The request also includes an endpoint, a host URL, and an HTTP version. Furthermore, the request contains headers with additional information that requests make a network request. We can go to google.com and then type in Android as a search term. This is what a simplified request would look like. Each part of the request has a specific purpose to help the server understand the client's request. This request starts with an HTTP method. This is a GET request, meaning that we're getting a resource from the server, which in this case is the web page with the search results. The request also includes an endpoint, a host URL, and an HTTP version. Furthermore, the request contains headers with additional information about the client itself or about the data we're trying to fetch. Don't worry about understanding all of the headers and just focus on the key parts of the request that we pointed out, like the GET method, as well as the google.com host and endpoint. Now let's take a moment to break down the request URL into its components. You've likely seen website URLs all the time, such as in the address bar of your web browser. The URL starts with the scheme, followed by a colon and 2 forward slashes, and it signifies what protocol to use. In this case, the scheme is HTTPS, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, as requests to this URL are secure. Google.com is the host, which corresponds to the domain that the request is being sent to this URL are, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol
What makes
Secure,
it
as
secure, though?
requests to this URL are secure. Google.com is the host, which corresponds to the domain that the request is being sent to. The specific resource that we're trying to access is specified with a path, with each segment separated by a slash. This path or endpoint corresponds to a specific task on the server side, such as getting search results. In some cases, you can provide additional data after the path in the form of parameters, such as specifying the search query in this example. And that's how the request URL is composed. You'll notice that the HTTP method in this request said GET. HTTP has different possible methods to help the server understand which type of operation the client is trying to perform. A GET request specifies an endpoint pointing to the exact resource that the client wants. In addition, GET requests can also be more specific by appending additional parameters to the URL. As mentioned, these are added after a question mark at the end of the path. If there are multiple parameters, they are separated by an ampersand. Here's an example.
What's an
In this
ampersand?
YouTube video URL,
The
the
equal?
first parameter V is for the unique identifier of the video, and
Oh,
the
this
second
one.
parameter T is the number of seconds into the video where we should start playing from. To create a new resource on the server, we can use the HTTP post method.
Wait, what's the first
Within the
one?
request, for the unique identifier of the video,
Oh,
and the
identifier.
second parameter T is the number of seconds into the video where we should start playing from. To create a new resource on the server, we can use the HTTP post method. Within the request, the client needs to include the new data to be added to the server. A post request will typically include at least one additional header specifying the type of data being posted, for example, if it's text or some other media type. The put operation replaces one piece of data in its entirety with another piece of data. You can think of it as updating a resource on the server. Finally, the HTTP delete method represents a delete operation. As you'd expect, you'd use a delete operation to remove a specific piece of data from a server. Using a social media app as an example, let's look at how the app would have requests that use different HTTP methods. When the user opens the app, it would be useful to fetch the list of all recent posts so they can see what their friends posted. That would be a GET request. When the user wants to add a new post, send the new information in an HTTP post request to the server. When the user wants to modify an existing post, send an HTTP put request to the server with the updated post information. And lastly, if the user wants to delete a previous post, send an HTTP delete request to the server and specify which post to delete. As you can see, it's important to specify the HTTP method in a request so the server knows what the client wants to be done. Alright, those are the key points to note for an HTTP request. Let's move on to the response now. When the server is done processing the request, an HTTP response is sent back. That's how the web browser, for example, is able to show the results for a search term. Here's what the HTTP response for the search request could look like. The response includes a number, called a status code, as well as a corresponding status message. Just like the request, the HTTP response contains various headers
What's this
containing
number?
additional information. Here's what the HTTP response for the search request could look like. The response includes a number, called a status code,
Status
as well as a
code.
corresponding status message.
Oh, that's HTTP 1.1, version 1.1.
Just like the request, the HTTP response contains various headers containing additional information from the server, like the content type, content encoding, timestamp information, and more. Again, you don't have to understand all the different response headers, but here's an important one to note. The content type specifies the media type of the response. Is it text, an image, or something else? In this case, the response contains an HTML document. Knowing what type of data is in the response is important because the client app needs to know how to parse or make sense of the data in order to display it to the user. After all the headers is the actual content, which is the HTML for this web page in our example. Or the content could be an image if the request was for an image. In the code lab you'll take, the response will be text data in the JSON format, which you'll learn more about later. We mentioned briefly that the response code contained a 200 status code, but what does that mean? There are many possible status codes, and they all fall into 5 basic categories. Some are used more frequently than others, so let's just talk about the common ones that you may run into. Statuses in the 200s, from 200 to 299, correspond to successful requests.
What about
If
300?
the resource returned successfully to the client, the response will carry a status code of 200. This is what we saw with our search request. Statuses in the 400s represent client errors. You may have seen the status code 404 if the client was a web browser and tried to access a web page that doesn't exist. Finally, status codes in the 500s represent server-side errors, for example, a 404 if the client was a web browser. Finally, status codes in the 500s represent server-side errors. For example, a 500 error is returned if there was an internal server error. Looking at the response status code can help you troubleshoot your app if you're not getting the response you expect. It can help point you in the direction of where to start looking for the problem. Is it a client-side issue or a server-side issue? That wraps up the high-level parts of an HTTP response and what they signify.
What's 300 so
Let's
far?
move on to talk about the server for a bit. In this pathway, you'll be building an app that makes network requests to a server. That server has a REST architecture style. A web service is considered RESTful if it abides by the following principles. RESTful services implement client-server architecture, where there is a clear separation of concerns between the client and the server. The client makes a request and the server sends back a response. Resources on the server are identified by a URI or Uniform Resource Identifier. Say, for example, the server stores a collection of photos. The server could expose a different URI for each photo, so you could retrieve each one individually. A RESTful service also provides a uniform interface, meaning that you can manipulate the resources with create, get, update, and delete operations. In REST, the server is also stateless, meaning that it does not need to remember the client's state between requests. Each client request should contain all information needed for the server to satisfy the request. There's also other characteristics that make a web service RESTful, but we won't get into that for now. Let's look at an example of a RESTful web service that stores messages. This server exposes a set of URIs that a client can use to make requests. When making a GET request with the first URI, you can get the list of all messages. Or you could do a GET request for an individual message by specifying the ID in the URI. Another endpoint allows the user to search messages for a certain query term. And the last endpoint available on the server is for creating a new message, and that requires an HTTP POST request with the contents of the new message. By looking at what functionality the server exposes, you can build your client Android app accordingly. As you move forward and build more complex apps, keep in mind what you've learned here about HTTP requests and responses. And by completing the code labs in this pathway, you'll have a better idea of how to call similar RESTful web services in your Android apps. Good luck and have fun.
Cool. I'm gonna have time for this collab. I don't want to do it in half. Yeah, I think I can finish it within 20 minutes. Let's just look deeper into HTTP stuff. Encryption. transfer is encrypted. That's why sometimes we see this kind of links. Representation of state transfer. I'd rather watch Ricky. Okay, I should do this. Cash, I guess it's like saving stuff locally. Easy retrieval, short-term storage. You can call multiple servers. You're on the phone. Anyway, end this video on this first part of this pathway. See you next video. Peace. Cool. Gonna end the stream.